Hello and welcome to Minto Dialogue, episode number 313. Today is Sunday, the 3rd of February 2019, and this interview with Dr. Rob Walker. Rob is the VP of Decision Management and Analytics at Pega Systems, the number one in software for customer engagement and digital process automation, working with very large businesses worldwide to redefine customer engagement and providing proactive, AI-powered service for customer service. In this conversation with Rob, we discuss how AI is being implemented in business. What are some of the real use cases? The challenges of getting it right, especially when it comes to marketing automation. Welcome to the Minto Dialogue podcast, where we discuss branding and all things digital. I am Minto Dial, your host, and you'll find the show notes on my eponymous site, mintodial.com. Enjoy the show. So, Rob Walker, great to have you on the show. Happy New Year, I think we're allowed to say still.
Yeah, I hope so. Happy New Year to you as well.
So, Rob, you and I connected thanks to our mutual connection and friend, Adrian Swinsko. He recommended that I get in touch with you because I was at the time researching and writing my book on how to code empathy into AI. And he said you were the guy. So we exchanged, and thanks to many of your contributions, has made my book a stronger piece. So tell us in your words who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm the Vice President of Decisioning and Analytics at Pega Systems. And Pega Systems is a US-based company that focuses on customer engagement as well as digital process automation. And I'm responsible for our AI space. And the most popular area where we apply that is in customer engagement and marketing and customer experience.
So how did you get into Pega?
Yeah, so I did a PhD in artificial intelligence, actually. So that was like in the late 90s. So quite well ahead of the hype cycle. And after that, I decided to found with a partner, a British partner, a company that really focused on AI in the area of customer experience. And that company was acquired by a Silicon Valley company called Cordiant, which was subsequently acquired by Pega. And it's a long-winded way of saying that I've been in this space for a very, very long time.
And what made you get into artificial intelligence? I suppose that was in the 90s. When did you do that?
Yeah, so I was hooked immediately. I mean, I thought it was really, really cool. And obviously at that time, we didn't have a fraction of the data, right, that researchers and businesses have today. But even then, I think the promise of artificial intelligence and what it could do at that time, and it hadn't quite beaten Kasparov yet, I believe, in chess. So it's a long time ago. But the promise, I think, really was irresistible to me.
So, all right, so the promise was there. I should say, in large respect, it still is there. To what extent do you see, I mean, obviously with the application within Pega Systems, where you're using AI, but how do you see AI in general for businesses? You know, when you're talking to your large customers, which are generally what I hear, understand, of Fortune 1000 type customers, where are they with AI? Are they trying to use it internally, or does it have to still be outsourced? How's it going?
Yeah, I think that depends a little bit on your definition of AI, and either it's early days or it's actually quite mature already and growing fast. And it depends. I'm saying it depends on your definition of AI, because if you insist that AI is only about like deep learning, you know, the kind of algorithms that, you know, beat us in chess and Go and recognize all sorts of images and patterns, that makes it, I think, a little immature in terms of business application. But if you define it as I do, which is a little bit more inspired by, I would think, Turing, you know, where we would say, well, if we have a system that makes intelligent decisions that you would normally attribute to a human, to a smart human, that's what I would call artificial intelligence. And I think a lot of companies with the abundance of data and big data now are using that a lot. And certainly, and I have a bias because I only talk, obviously, to the companies that are very interested in this. But in the realm of customer engagement and customer interactions and customer experience, I think without some use of AI is probably doomed to failure at this point.
So when you're looking at these, let's say, more simple versions of AI as opposed to deep learning, to what extent are these algorithms actually learning, or is it more a case of better cleaning, better, larger data sets?
No, I think that's a very good question. No, I would definitely include learning in this aspect. So I think when you make smart decisions, I don't think it's smart to keep repeating the same decision. So this is not a collection of if then else rules or something. These are all learning algorithms, but it may not always be neural nets, right? So I definitely include the more sophisticated machine learning algorithms in the realm of AI.
And when you look at your customers, obviously you're more involved in customer engagement and use within the marketing space, but where do you see other great applications of AI happening today as opposed to still a promise?
Well, obviously we have the whole realm of self-driving cars, which I think is a great feat. I think there's also a lot of promise in areas where AI is trying to guess at emotions and reading and face recognition and in that kind of area. I really try to focus myself, which is difficult because it's such a cool space, right? And I'm at heart I'm a nerd, but I really try to focus on the business value of AI, and that draws me inevitably to the customer engagement side and creating customer value.
I can't help but think, and like with digital transformation as that cloudy topic is, with AI, it's actually capable or has a potential role in pretty much everything. And so when you're discussing with customers, what sort of misconceptions do you feel are most frequent when you're dealing with them? I mean, obviously, when you're talking nerd to nerd, it's one thing, but when you're talking to the business guy who's there or woman who is obviously intelligent, but has not had the privilege of having a PhD and really doesn't get it, what sort of misconceptions do you see? And what are the challenges of bringing AI into the organization?
Yeah, well, it's not just the misconceptions. It's also stuff that they are rightfully afraid of. I think that's typically a topic of discussion. But I will say, first of all, that AI really is a means to an end, right, for businesses, especially if you talk to the business side. If you talk to the technical people, they may really like some of the algorithms or AI and be deeply into that. But on the business side, in the end, it's about profitability. It's about being relevant. It's about lots of business KPIs, right? And if that's happening through AI or it's happening through Turbo Pascal, in a sense, that wouldn't really make a material difference. I do think that on the business side, the misconception is that AI is necessarily maybe a scary thing, right? So they know the promise, they know it's intelligent and it can scale the intelligence much faster than they might otherwise be able to do. But they fear it's a black box, and it can be, right? So we really put a lot of effort actually on that side of AI as well. In addition to just performance, to make sure that companies can make a choice and keep control over AI and insist on transparency and explanatory AI where that's required, or go all out where that's possible. And I think that kind of control is really important.
So in a world of GDPR, that transparency, as opposed to the work in the United States, although you can update me on that, that it strikes me as a really complicated thing to explain how my machine learned.
Well, that's true, and therefore, for some use cases, you would have to, what we would say, toggle the switch. Definitely in our software, that would be the case, where you say, well, for customer engagement, where transparency is a requirement, and we need to explain our decisions after learning. We need to sort of dial it down. So the AI is constrained to algorithms that can explain themselves. GDPR, though, doesn't always exist on transparency. It's insisting on explaining decisions if those decisions have a significant legal impact, like maybe rejecting you for a mortgage or accepting you for a mortgage or those kind of things. But if it's less meaningful from a legal perspective, you don't necessarily have to explain exactly how that's done. So probably in marketing gets a pass in many cases.
Mm. So one of the areas, of course, of great discussion and riles people up, great for bait clicking and so on, is this notion that AI is there to take over the world, and specifically automation. Yet within automation, my observation, AI with or AI-less, I see marketing automation as more of a peril to marketing, in that people obviously at big companies need to have some form of AI and some form of automation. But at the same time, the way it's done, I find just too often it just results, it's just another version of spam. And so I think of marketing automation as more of a peril to the long-term sanity and health of a brand if you don't find a way. So within that, how do you manage the volume, the velocity, VUCA, and the massive amount of marketing needed with an automation?
Yeah, no, and let me just start with saying I cannot agree more. I think it's really, if you look at the usual marketing metrics like response rate or click-through rates or impressions, all of these things are really at the level that are nothing short of appalling. It's really, really bad. And then the reaction to that is to increase the reach, spam more people, right? And that in turn then means that consumers trust it even less, which so it's a death spiral, really, I think, for marketing and for brands that we're currently in. And I think the reason for that is that we're trying to automate, sometimes even using some AI, but we're trying to automate constructs in marketing, especially in direct marketing, that we've been using since the 80s. Concepts like campaigns and segments. It's very, very dated, right? And I think the challenge in marketing that we're trying to solve, and AI is really instrumental in that, is to really now make good on that promise of one-to-one, right? Where you are not setting up a campaign to say, hey, this is my platinum card, who would be an audience, but everybody in if this was a bank, they will do their own segmentation. They have different propositions, so they're all spamming together with all the other banks, all the people that are, likely going to respond to that. Instead of saying, hey, this is Minter. What of all the different things we could talk to him about? What should we be talking about? Like insert some empathy in that thing, right? Make sure that you understand customer suitability and interests. And then decide what to talk about, which is a radical notion for marketers who really are interested in selling a particular product rather than looking at like, hey, what's relevant right now, given the whole context of this particular customer or prospect, and let's talk about that. And it's an incredible increase in all of these KPIs that I discussed earlier that you get as a result.
Well, I mean, so if we talk KPIs, I like to provocatively suggest that if your click rate through is, let's say, a massive 2.5%,
it's massive.
Yeah, you're pissing the heck out of 97.5% of your audience.
Absolutely, yes, but I think the reason, and actually 2.5% would be awesome. I think for most brands, right? It's probably more like 0.1. And the reason that's the case is because we're trying to sell them this platinum card, right? And then because nobody actually clicks it, we have to create, a phishing net that is like, 1 million people wide to get like just the number of responders that we would like. But you get much, much higher click-through rates or response rates if you actually looked at like, what is the thing of all the things I could talk about? what is the thing I should be talking about? And that may actually be nothing at all, because nothing is relevant enough to basically waste somebody's time with at this moment in time.
And I don't see many managers having the balls to, stop that email going through because, hey, maybe they'll just click on it anyway.
Yes, and that's the challenge. So a lot of the large companies I talk to have to overcome that challenge. So you need to be able to talk to people that are senior enough that they don't have KPIs on a particular product, right? Because if you're the head of the platinum card, that is how you are going to respond. But if you're the head of the bank, right, what you actually want is to make sure that every interaction counts, and you'll need massive application of AI to figure that out in real time. And it may be the card, or maybe it's a mortgage, or maybe it's a service message, right? Or maybe it's nothing at all. Silence is also a treatment, right? That kind of thinking is senior level thinking, but the actual business benefits are so massive that you always find somebody who is keenly interested in it.
I love the idea that silence is a message. Absolutely. I'm tempted to jump in on the empathy comment, but I want to go back just a second to say, well, as you implement Pegasystems marketing automation with AI into large customers, as beautiful and robust as your machine and platform is, what distinguishes successful implementation versus non-successful implementation?
Well, it's actually going back to your previous observation, because as Pega, we can't afford to force people to say, "Hey, listen, this whole one-to-one thing using next best action and AI, that's to be on the right side of history. That's where everything is going." We still need to be able to cater for more traditional marketing, and also, honestly, even for companies that want to do that transformation, there needs to be a transition period where you probably need to do both. So given that, the biggest challenge is probably convincing people of the the improvement in business outcomes, as well as in customer satisfaction, by changing it from this segment driven approach to one-to-one
NPS or some other
yeah,
type of
exactly.
metric.
Those metrics. So we work with brands, for instance, where everyone has in their own KPIs and therefore their Christmas bonuses NPS, right? And that makes for way better conversations about, well, should we offer the mortgage, or should we offer the credit card, right? Should we offer the iPhone, or should we do a particular rate plan, or whatever it is? It's a much better, much more customer-centric conversation that you get. But I have to say that whereas maybe 2 years ago, when I was talking about AI and practical use cases, I had to do a lot of convincing on how this actually works and is it feasible. Now most of my conversations are about the governance model and the operational model. So how do we change the culture? How do we change the siloed approach instead of the technical challenges?
Which is so typical in the realm of the bigger or the other topic, which is digital, in general, digital transformation, and the AI, of course, is part of that puzzle. So when you are dealing with your customers, then you end up with a lot of discussions about culture.
Absolutely. Yes. And I love those discussions, right? I mean, honestly, years ago, that was a little bit unnerving, because you sometimes felt like, okay, this is a massive oil tanker that we need to change, and the culture is just going to be a blocker, right? In some cases, and then only the brave companies that are now making a lot of money and have much more satisfied customers as a result started, right? And the laggards probably were a little bit more cautious, but frankly, now with enough companies that have really observed incredible results, both on the customer side with NPS and on the business side with profits and those kind of things, it's a way easier conversation.
So obviously, to the extent that you can tell us, you're obviously dealing with large customers. Tell us just a little bit about how big Pegasystems is today.
Yeah, so Pegasystems is, I would think, a reasonable size with about 4,000 employees worldwide. It's US based, but it has offices in APAC, in Europe, in Japan, India, um, and it's really focusing on this Fortune 1,000 approximately, give or take, um, companies,
And
because they
they're
have complex problems and they have lots of data.
and you're headquartered in Boston, correct?
That is
In
correct.
Massachusetts.
Yes.
So dealing with these customers, you have obviously multinationals, and I'm wondering to what extent with these silos, the issue of data is so kernel to AI. So how does the conversation go? Like, well, that's my data. That's country X's data versus country Y's data when it comes to large B2B organizations or large companies which are dealing with clients around the world.
Yeah, we have quite a few companies. I'd rather not mention them by names, but yes, they are very large multinational companies. But even individually in the country, right, they have a lot of data on the customers, right? So we don't really need and say, listen, we need to add the Dutch data to the French data to the Canadian data to have enough data, right? That's really not the challenge. I think these multinational companies actually worry a lot more about, okay, we have AI, we have our strategies. How can we make sure that we are consistent in all of these different opcos? I think that's probably more of a challenge, how they are, consistent in their approach than the data challenge, because it's data at a consumer level,
Well, so the
right, at the customer
quantity of
level.
data, but what about the cleanliness of the data and maybe the receptacle and compatibilities of the different datas in order to get that picture to get the personalization that you want?
Yeah, so usually we have not found an issue in getting to like individual entities, um, and applying this technology. That's really not so much the issue. I think it becomes a little bit more of an issue when you, for instance, have to market to European customers as an American company, and you get into some GDPR complexities. But in general, on the data side, even if they're siloed into their separate opcos, there is more data than we and AI knows to do it.
When I talk to my friends who are data scientists, they tell me with some flair that basically 80 or more percent of their business or typical job of a data scientist is cleaning databases.
Yes.
To what extent that's also true for you? And I mean, ultimately, if you're going to do this great personalization and a learning machine that's going to help you understand how to serve Minter with the right thing at the right time when he wants it and so on, how does the data story go? And is it really not a prerequisite for a company to have a robust data scientist team and all that in order to serve you better?
It does, and I think I can't recall an implementation where the data scientists do not work hand in hand with the AI. But the practicality is that the data scientists, especially because they are spending a lot of their time cleaning data and doing experiments and things like that, they never have the bandwidth to create the thousands, literally thousands of like probability models that you would need to get close to have an appreciation of empathy and interest, and those kind of things. So there's so many models that you need. AI really comes to the rescue. It also comes to the rescue in terms of actually doing the data audit, right? It's not like, it's obviously garbage in, garbage out, but it's not like modern AI is naive about testing itself, right? So it knows that the data it has is not good enough, and it will say, hey, listen, I can't make a reliable prediction based on this. Or I can make a reliable prediction on these 23 attributes, and the other 500 I'm not going to use. So it really helps humans, sift through the data as well. But it's mostly the collaboration, I think, in that case that gives us the best results.
So when you're looking at this idea of personalization, which we mentioned before, this notion of getting to serve the customer with the right thing, great value at the right time. We talked about empathy, and it really is of tremendous interest to me to think about how to code your machine to be more empathic. Because ultimately, if it does have that empathy, or at least the perception of empathy, it's going to be able to better serve Minter, the end customer. So, now in your own words, where are we on helping machines, even in a GDPR world, I guess, to get towards some form of coded empathy?
Yeah, I think it's a complex question because I think in many ways, obviously, and I think you say it correctly, like it's perception of empathy, right? Unless we are going to get very very philosophical, so it's the perception of empathy, but the standard shouldn't be some kind of divine oracle, what the ideal tool is to understand empathy. The benchmark should be human empathy, right? And in many cases, that's not awesome. I mean, sure, it's great with with friends or with your spouse or a girlfriend or any of these things. But in terms of brands talking to customers, empathy is not great. And I think AI can actually help because AI has a lot more context, right? So I think empathy, if you really wanted to make it like a little bit mathematical, it's basically looking at like, is something interested, right? Is something relevant for Minter? Secondly, is it appropriate to offer this, right? Even to protect him, right? Maybe he's going to, get this loan from us, but we already know he's not going to pay us back, right? So we need to see if it's suitable, and we need to see if it's, sort of legally feasible, right? All of these things, I think, in practice amount to something that if it was a human, you would say, oh, that system gets me, right? It knows this is relevant because it has looked at like stuff I've done, all the digital breadcrumbs I've left, I've left everywhere. It knows what I've just done on this different channel. All of these things are probably more empathic than if it was just a human talking to you in a call center.
So if we go back to this notion of Kasparov and Deep Blue finally winning, anyone in AI will know that most people will say it's about AI plus human is stronger than AI alone or human alone. Would you agree with that as a first premise?
I think that honestly, the jury is out. First of all, I would like to say that, and I think Kasparov was definitely thinking that, because I think Deep Blue and its cousins, right? That was really sort of an exhaustive search as far as you can take that with chess, and I think the human creativity element would really add to that. I think if you see where we're going now with like AlphaZero and those kind of deep learning algorithms, I think it plays much more creatively. And it would actually be interesting to hear Kasparov, what he thinks now, whether it's still really requiring the collaboration or that AI is just becoming much more human-like in how it plays chess.
So if we're in this mode of empathy and computers or the artificial intelligence is able to do it better than us, I felt that it's at a risk for your company and your culture if you are delegating your empathy to a machine.
Yes. Now, I think let me put two positions there, right? One is people are very happy delegating it to humans that they may also not completely understand, right? So people, these companies may have thousands of people, tens of thousands of people that are engaging with customers. None of them they have really, put under an empathy MRI scan to see how they are coded, right, and how they deal with this. They may do some tests. So that's one part of the equation. But secondly, I absolutely agree. I think in terms of that, you should not really hand the reins to AI to talk to your customers. I think, despite what I just said about chess and those kind of things, I think in customer engagement, a combination is still very powerful because a human can do a lot of things that the AI cannot do. But on the other hand, the AI can do a lot of things humans can't do. And that, I think, is still a powerful combination. But even if it was all AI, there needs to be an AI governance model, which is what we advocate for all the brands we work with, where you can insist on this, transparency versus opacity of AI to make sure that it doesn't go rogue on you.
So when you talk about this governance and transparency, this transparency must be more internal to begin with. I mean, so you understand it as your organization, what you're doing, some board level understanding of what the AI is actually doing, manipulating underneath.
Yeah, but I also mean it at a more granular level, right? I mean, there are algorithms, and deep learning is one of them, but there are also others like evolutionary computing, genetic programming, genetic algorithms, where the model that is the complete logical expression of the decision is completely opaque, right? Where you would not be able to reconstruct exactly the subtlety, the nuance of how it comes to a particular decision. And I think so. That's also the opacity I'm talking about, right? So it's not like this is overall what our AI is doing, but also in individual cases, in individual decisions, you may want to insist on an explanation that a human can understand, or say, okay, in this case, just go all out. We don't need to completely understand it because you're looking at 1,000 different things and combine them in endless different combination. We don't understand how it works, but we still want to test the end result and look for a bias or look for particular patterns that you deem to be undesirable.
The issue of bias, of course, is another hot topic in AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does one avoid, or how does one create a governance where bias is as little present or as undesirably present as desired, as wished?
Yeah, well, I think the solution, I know there's a lot of debate about this, and that's because the data is biased, right? And that's a logical conclusion that, I think we discussed before. If you have like an investment bank and they want to know who should be interested in their products, the data they have at their disposal it's only about people that are actually appropriate for being investment bank customers. So there's a huge bias in their data. But the moment the AI, if there was an AI looking at that data and it's getting exposed, right, to the real world, it will unlearn these biases pretty quickly, right? And you can do that in a controlled environment. So ironically, I think, to expose AI and AI-driven decisions is going to unbias the system much quicker than being afraid to use it at all.
So the transparency is the key to unlock, getting the unbiased approach.
I wouldn't say, that's definitely, because if it's transparent, you can actually analyze it, right? And see, oh, look, it's looking at gender, or it's looking at race, so you can actually see how it gets to something that could be a potential bias because it has to explain itself. If it's opaque AI, that will not be the case. There's nowhere where you could even identify where it's looking at like race or gender or age or whatever bias you're worried about, because it may look at very different things that are a proxy for age or race or gender, right? So you could never figure it out, but you can test the end result, right? So you can see, like, if I'm making decisions with this AI system, it actually makes decisions that are very unfavorable to a certain segment of customers, and it makes very different decisions than what we normally do without that system. Now, that's a red flag that you can test on if the AI is opaque. If it's transparent, you can just inspect it and try to figure it out.
So just before we're going to be finishing soon. We were mentioning how your competitors are the big, well-known competitors out of Salesforce, Adobe, and the like in their robust marketing platforms. That said, what about the small companies? And why? What if I'm in a smaller company? Let's say you and I began a little startup of, just and had a few $1 million in revenues. Is there a place for an AI basis, or is that when does AI, shall I say, put another way, become relevant as a tool within my marketing platform?
Yeah, I think the promise of that is definitely quite universal. I mean, I think the constraints are mostly about how much data do I have and how many interactions do I have, right? Constraining this a little bit to customer engagement, right? So the larger companies will have many, many more interactions. They will have millions of interactions every day, hundreds of millions in many cases, right? So it's very fertile ground for AI to learn how to optimize that. Smaller companies will have fewer of those interactions, so it's a little bit harder, but it depends on what is small. Like if it's a really small company, yeah, probably this kind of AI is not particularly useful and also likely too expensive. But whereas we focus on the Fortune 1000, I'm sure that the Fortune 10,000 maybe actual, they will have enough data, enough customers, enough interactions to make AI worthwhile.
Those will be your clients of 2025. All right. So, Rob, thank you so much for coming on. Tell us how someone can track you down or follow you if you prefer. And, of course, get in touch with Pega if they are part of a large enough company
yes.
for you.
Well, just find, I think the easiest way is just, ping me on LinkedIn. So that's rob.walker@pega.com, and you'll find me. Either send me an email or find me on LinkedIn.
Beautiful. All right. Well, I'll put all that in the show notes. Great to have you on the show. And thanks again for your contributions to artificial empathy. And I look forward to staying in touch and seeing how AI continues to become more artificially intelligent.
Okay. Thank you. It's been great talking to you.
Thanks for having listened to this recording of the Minto Dialogue Show. You'll find the show notes and other blog posts on mintodial.com. If you enjoyed the show, please like the handy Facebook button. Or better yet, head over to iTunes to give a rating and review. But first, relax to Josh Sachs's Finger Paint.
Oh, fill me with all your colors, any different way to rid me of the gray, and heal me with all your imperfections that you mention in your lack of self-security. Oh, I wouldn't care about the art form as long as you would feel warm, wrapped in canvas. Hold me tightly, slowly we would paint a lover's portrait with all your favorite shades. And we paint it with our fingers to show the world the way we feel. Oh, the way we feel. Oh, so messy. The ridges in our palms make colors blend.